Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The morning air smelled of salt and destruction. Serena Brooks stood in front of what remained of Brooks Flow Cafe, her dream reduced to splintered wood and shattered glass. Hurricane Clara had swept through Miami with vengeful fury 3 days ago, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. "It's all gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of chainsaws and emergency vehicles still clearing the streets. 6 months of savings, 2 years of planning, and just 8 weeks of actually being open all washed away in a single night. The small coffee counter, where she'd served her grandmother's secret recipe Cuban coffee, lay crushed under a fallen beam. The hand-painted mural of the Miami coastline, that local artist Javier had spent weeks perfecting, was now just fragments of color among the debris. Serena stepped carefully through what had once been her front door, wincing as broken glass crunched beneath her boots. The waterline on the remaining walls showed how high the storm surge had reached, nearly 5 feet. Everything below that mark was ruined. The antique espresso machine she'd restored herself, the custom-built pastry case, even the old family photos she'd hung to make the space feel like home. She bent down to retrieve a waterlogged menu card, the ink bleeding across the paper. Her grandmother's recipes: cafecito, pastelito de guayaba, tres leches, cake listed in both English and Spanish. Serena had wanted everyone to feel welcome here. Serena's phone buzzed in her pocket. Her insurance agent again. She let it ring through to voicemail. No point answering when she already knew what he would say. Act of God, limited coverage, deductible too high. The technical terms that essentially meant she was on her own. The phone buzzed again immediately after. This time her landlord, another call she couldn't bear to answer. The cafe space rent was due in a week, and her apartment rent was already 2 weeks late. Serena. She turned to find her best friend Lila picking her way through the rubble, careful not to snag her nurse's scrubs. Lila had come straight from her night shift at Miami General, dark circles under her eyes indicating she hadn't slept yet. "You shouldn't be here," Serena said, wiping quickly at her eyes. "You need rest, and you need a friend." Lila wrapped an arm around Serena's shoulders. "Any word from the insurance company?" Serena laughed bitterly. "They'll cover about 20% of the damage, barely enough to haul away the debris, let alone rebuild. What about a loan? Your credit's good. 3 banks, 3 rejections." Serena kicked at a piece of broken tile. "Apparently, being wiped out by a hurricane makes me a high-risk investor." Lila's eyes narrowed. "Like what? Selling your organs?" "At this point, I'm considering it." Serena wasn't entirely joking. The cafe had been more than a business. It was her heritage, her grandmother's recipes finally having a home outside their family kitchen. Now, with the foreclosure notice on her apartment already in the mail, she had nowhere to live and no business to rebuild. "Did you try calling that small business association, the one that helps with disaster relief?" Lila asked. 7-month waiting list for funds," Serena replied. "And even then, it's just low-interest loans, not grants." She sighed. "I don't want to just survive, Elle. This cafe was supposed to be my future. There might be another way," Lila said hesitantly after a long pause. "But you're not going to like it." Serena raised an eyebrow. "I'm living on your couch and about to lose everything I've worked for. Try me." Lila pulled her away from the rubble toward her car. "Not here. Let's get coffee first." The irony of which is not lost on me. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth of a generic chain coffee shop, Serena grimacing as she sipped what passed for a cortado here. "This is an insult to coffee everywhere," she muttered, adding more sugar in a futile attempt to improve the taste. "So," Serena prompted, "this mysterious solution you mentioned?" Lila fidgeted with her cup. "I overheard something at the hospital. There's this patient, well, not really a patient. He owns half the hospital wing. Get to the point, Elle. Damian Knight is looking for a surrogate, but not the traditional way." Lila leaned in, lowering her voice. "He wants to conceive naturally, one time only, with someone healthy, intelligent, and attractive. In exchange, he's offering enough money to." She gestured vaguely in the direction of the destroyed cafe. Serena stared at her friend, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she set her cup down carefully. "You're suggesting I sell my body and my child to some rich guy I've never met?" "I'm suggesting you hear the details before dismissing it," Lila countered. "This isn't some creepy old man. He's in his 30s, self-made billionaire, and from what I gather, He's offering a comprehensive contract that protects both parties. Why would a billionaire need to pay for this? Can't he just date someone? Apparently, he doesn't want the emotional complications. Business is his life, and he wants an heir without the messiness of a relationship. Leela shrugged. He's willing to pay 6 figures, plus medical expenses, and a stipend during pregnancy. Serena shook her head in disbelief. This is insane. I'm not that desperate. But even as she said it, her mind calculated the mortgage payments piling up, the suppliers she still owed, the loans that would follow her for decades. The cafe had been her last connection to her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents died, who had taught her that food was love made tangible. And what happens to the baby afterward? I'm just supposed to hand over my child and cash the check. The thought made her stomach turn. From what I understand, you'd have some visitation rights, but he'd have primary custody. It's all spelled out in the contract. Lila reached across the table to squeeze Serena's hand. Look, I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just laying out an option because I can't stand seeing you lose everything you've worked for. Serena pulled her hand away, suddenly feeling trapped. The coffee shop's walls seemed to close in around her, the chatter of other customers growing distant as her thoughts raced. Was she really considering this? What would her grandmother say? Just think about it, Lila said, sliding a business card across the table. His assistant's contact information. The worst that happens is you meet him and say no. Serena picked up the card-heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. Valeria Cruz, Executive Assistant to Damian Knight. Knight Enterprises. I'll think about it, she said finally, tucking the card into her pocket. But only because I've officially hit rock bottom. What she didn't say was that rock bottom felt a lot like standing in quicksand, and she was sinking fast enough to grab at any rope, no matter how repulsive the hand holding it might be. That night, alone on Lila's couch, with the foreclosure notice in one hand and the business card in the other, Serena made the call. She had exactly 3 weeks before the bank took everything, and her grandmother had always told her that pride made a poor bedmate when survival was at stake. The assistant answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Mr. Knight can see you tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. The car will pick you up at 1:30. No questions asked, no details required, as if Serena was simply another business transaction waiting to be processed. I thank you, Serena managed to say, her throat suddenly dry. Should I bring anything? A resume or... She trailed off, realizing how absurd the question was. What qualifications did one need to sell their womb, Mr. Knight has already reviewed your background. Just be punctual. The line went dead before Serena could ask how Damian Knight knew anything about her. As she set the phone down, Serena caught sight of her reflection in Lila's darkened television screen. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, desperate, cornered, considering something she would have found unthinkable just days ago. Just a meeting. She told her reflection, you're just going to hear him out. But as she lay awake that night, watching headlights trace patterns across Lila's living room ceiling, Serena wondered how much of her soul she was willing to trade to keep her dreams alive. Tomorrow, she would find out exactly what the going rate was. Chapter 2. The Proposition. The black car arrived precisely at 1:30 p.m. Serena watched it from Lila's apartment window, a sleek Mercedes with tinted windows that seemed to absorb the Miami sunlight rather than reflect it. The driver, dressed in a crisp suit despite the heat, exited and scanned the building numbers before checking his watch. Well, that's punctual, Lila said from behind her. You sure you don't want me to come with you? Serena shook her head, smoothing down the front of her navy blue dress, the only professional outfit she'd managed to salvage from her flooded apartment. I need to do this alone. Just remember, you can walk away at any point. Lila squeezed her shoulder. No matter how intimidating he is. Serena had spent half the night researching Damian Knight. Business magazines called him brilliant, ruthless, innovative. Social media branded him cold, calculating, devastatingly handsome. Every article mentioned his intensely private nature and laser focus on expanding Knight Enterprises from tech into healthcare, real estate, and green energy. None explained why a man who could have anything would need to hire a woman to bear his child. Downtown Miami, skyscrapers gleamed in the afternoon sun, survivors of the hurricane that had devastated the smaller structures. The car pulled up to one of the tallest, a modern glass tower with Knight Enterprises emblazoned across the top in understated lettering. Miss Brooks, the driver said, opening her door, please proceed to the private elevator. Miss, Cruz will meet you there. The lobby felt more like an art gallery than an office building, with soaring ceilings and sculptures that probably cost more than what remained of Serena's cafe. A woman waited by a sleek elevator set apart from the main bank hall, impeccably dressed, with a tablet in hand. Miss Brooks, Valeria Cruz. Her handshake was firm, professional. Follow me, please. The elevator required a key card and fingerprint scan. Mr. Knight values his privacy, Valeria explained as they ascended. The top 3 floors are his exclusive domain. Serena nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. How many women has he interviewed for this position? Valeria's expression remained neutral. You're the first. The elevator doors opened directly into a vast office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Miami's glittering bay, the beach, and, in the distance, the neighborhood still recovering from the hurricane. Serena could almost see the flattened remains of her cafe from this height. Mr. Knight will join you momentarily. Would you like water? Coffee? No, thank you, Serena managed, though her throat felt like sandpaper. Valeria disappeared through a side door. Leaving Serena alone with the intimidating view, she approached the windows, drawn to the sight of her city, spread out beneath her. Miami always rebuilds, a deep voice said from behind her, though some recover faster than others. Serena turned to find herself face to face with Damian Knight. The photos hadn't done him justice. Tall, with broad shoulders and an athletic build, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to power. His dark hair was cut short, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. But it was his eyes that caught Serena off guard, a penetrating gray that seemed to calculate everything they observed. Mr. Knight, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for seeing me. His handshake was firm, brief. Damian, please, if we're discussing what I think we're discussing, formality seems unnecessary. He gestured toward a seating area, modern leather chairs arranged around a low glass table. You've lost something in the hurricane, he said, taking a seat across from her. Not a question, but a statement. My cafe. Brooks Flow. Serena swallowed hard. 8 weeks open before Clara hit. Brooks Flow, he repeated. Cuban-inspired cuisine with a modern twist. Located in Little Havana. Your grandmother's recipes formed the foundation of your menu. Serena blinked in surprise. You've done your research. I never enter negotiations uninformed. He leaned forward slightly. I know about the 3 bank rejections, the insurance settlement that covers barely a fifth of your losses, the foreclosure notice on your apartment, your excellent credit score until 3 weeks ago, your culinary degree from Johnson & Wales, your grandmother who raised you after your parents died in that car accident when you were 11. A chill ran through Serena despite the comfortable temperature. That's thorough. I'm trusting you with something precious to me. Due diligence is required. His expression softened marginally. I'm sorry about your cafe. The review in the Miami Herald suggested it had exceptional potential. He stood and walked to a sideboard, where he poured 2 glasses of water. Which brings us to why you're here. He handed her a glass, and Serena took it gratefully, using the moment to gather her composure. My friend mentioned you're looking for a surrogate. Not exactly. Damian returned to his seat. A surrogate carries another couple's embryo. What I'm proposing is a natural conception, resulting in a child that would be biologically both of ours, though legally primarily mine. The clinical way he described it made Serena's skin crawl, yet his directness was almost refreshing after days of sympathetic platitudes from bank managers. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Why this arrangement instead of the usual ways people have children? Something flickered in his eyes amusement. Perhaps. The usual ways involve lengthy emotional entanglements that I have neither the time nor inclination for. My company demands my complete focus. I don't date, Miss Brooks. I don't do relationships. But you want a child. I want an heir, he corrected. Someone to build this legacy for. Someone to continue what I've started when I'm gone. That sounds very medieval, Serena said before she could think better of it. To her surprise, he smiled a brief, genuine expression that transformed his face. Perhaps, but pragmatic. I'm 38. Building something that will outlast me has become a priority. He reached for a leather portfolio on the table, opening it to reveal a document several inches thick. This is the agreement I'm proposing. My attorneys have drafted it to protect both our interests. Serena stared at the contract, its legal terminology swimming before her eyes. Could you just explain it in simple terms first? Damian nodded. The terms are straightforward. We would have one night together with the explicit purpose of conception. Following confirmation of pregnancy, I would provide financial support throughout the pregnancy medical care, living expenses, nutritional needs. Upon delivery of a healthy child, you would receive the agreed-upon sum. The child would legally be mine, with you having limited visitation rights if you desire them, and the amount is $2 million, plus all expenses during pregnancy. Serena nearly choked on her water. The figure was far more than she needed to rebuild the cafe and clear her debts. That's significant. I don't undervalue important services, Damien said simply. And bringing my child into the world is perhaps the most important service anyone could provide me. Serena set her glass down carefully. What if I don't get pregnant? We try once more. If that fails, you receive a consolation payment of $100,000 for your time and effort. His gaze was steady, unemotional. There are medical screenings first, of course. My doctor would examine you tomorrow if you agree to move forward. And if I have pregnancy complications, or if Serena forced herself to say it, if I miscarry, full medical care, regardless of outcome. Half payment in case of late-term loss. He spoke as if discussing a business merger rather than the potential loss of a child. Serena stood abruptly, needing space from his calculating presence. She walked back to the windows, looking out at the city where her dreams lay in ruins. $2 million would not only rebuild her cafe, but could fund several locations. She could create the restaurant empire her grandmother had always believed she was capable of building. All it would cost was 9 months of her life. And giving up a child. I would need my own lawyer to review this, she said without turning around. Of course, I've taken the liberty of providing a list of reputable attorneys who specialize in reproductive law. You may choose any of them, and I'll cover their fees, regardless of your final decision. Serena turned back to face him. Why me? With your resources, you could have approached anyone. For the first time, Damien seemed slightly uncomfortable. He stood, joining her by the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Genetics matter to me. Your medical history is excellent. No hereditary conditions of concern. Your intelligence is evident in your academic performance and business planning. Your appearance is, his eyes briefly scanned her face, aesthetically pleasing. Your demonstrated resilience and determination in building your business suggests character traits I would value in a child. You make me sound like a prize-breeding mare, Serena said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. I make you sound like what you are, a potential genetic contributor to the most important project of my life. His voice remained even. I'm not looking for a wife, Miss Brooks. I'm not looking for love. I'm looking for the right genetic match and a clear arrangement without messy emotions. And you think having a child isn't messy? That feelings won't complicate things? With proper legal boundaries, complications can be minimized. He returned to the table, closing the portfolio. Take the contract. Have your attorney review it. You have 3 days to decide. Serena felt dismissed, yet also strangely empowered. This cold, calculating man needed something from her that all his billions couldn't simply purchase outright. What if I want changes to the terms? Damien raised an eyebrow. Such as? I don't know yet, but I want the option to negotiate, not just accept or reject. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Reasonable. My assistant will provide her direct line. When your attorney has reviewed the contract, we can discuss any proposed amendments. Valeria appeared as if summoned, carrying a slim leather case. The contract, the attorney list, and my contact information, she explained, handing it to Serena. The car is waiting whenever you're ready. Damien extended his hand once more. I look forward to hearing your decision, Miss Brooks. His hand was warm, his grip confident. Serena wondered what it would be like to be touched by those hands in a more intimate context. The thought sent an unexpected shiver through her that she immediately tried to suppress. You'll have my answer within 3 days, she said, relieved that her voice remained steady. As the elevator descended, Serena opened the case. Scanning the first page of the contract, the language was cold. Clinical genetic contribution, biological merger, parental rights transfer. Nothing about the miracle of creating life. The bond between mother and child. Could she really do this trade a piece of herself, her child, for financial security? Back at Lila's apartment, her friend was waiting anxiously. How did it go? What's he like? Are you going to do it? Serena set the contract case on the coffee table. He's exactly what you'd expect. Cold, calculating, completely detached. He talked about having a child like he was ordering a custom-built car, but the money $2 million, Lila's eyes widened. Holy yeah. Serena sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. He wants an answer in 3 days. What are you thinking? Serena stared at the leather case. Inside was the potential salvation of her dreams, the resurrection of her cafe, financial security she'd never imagined possible, all in exchange for a child she hadn't planned on having anyway, at least not anytime soon. I'm thinking I need to find a lawyer, and then I need to decide how much of my soul I'm willing to sell to this devil in a bespoke suit. What she didn't say, couldn't admit even to Lila, was that beneath her disgust at the clinical nature of his proposal, she'd felt something else during that mitinga, flicker of attraction, unwanted and inconvenient. To the man who saw her as nothing more than a biological vessel for his future heir. And that, perhaps, scared her more than the contract itself. Chapter 3. The arrangement. 3 days of legal consultations, sleepless nights, and endless debates with Lila had led to this moment. Serena stood outside Damien Knight's penthouse door, contract in hand, heart pounding. After multiple revisions and negotiations, some of which had surprised her by being accepted without argument, she had signed the agreement that morning. She was officially selling her womb to a billionaire. The attorney she'd chosen, Sofia Mendez, had been thorough and surprisingly supportive. "This isn't the worst contract I've seen," she'd said after reviewing the initial draft. "But we're going to make it better," and they had, adding provisions for Serena's post-birth recovery, clearer visitation rights, and a clause preventing Damien from seeking additional children from her in the future without a completely new agreement. Now, as Valeria Cruz led her into a different part of the penthouse than she'd seen before, Serena couldn't help wondering if any legal language could truly prepare her for what was about to happen. "Mr. Knight will join you shortly," Valeria said, gesturing to a sitting room furnished with understated luxury. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Wine?" "Water is fine," Serena replied, her throat suddenly dry. As Valeria left, she took in her surroundings. Unlike the stark modernity of his office, this space felt almost warm, rich woods, soft lighting, and a wall of windows showcasing the Miami skyline, now twinkling with evening lights. "You came." Serena turned to find Damien watching her from the doorway. Gone was the impeccable business suit, replaced by dark jeans and a simple gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casual attire should have made him look more approachable. Somehow, it only emphasized his inherent power. "I signed the contract," she said, gesturing to the folder on the coffee table. "Your assistant already confirmed the first payment was deposited." The good faith deposit of $50,000 had appeared in her account that morning, enough to secure temporary housing and begin clearing her most pressing debts. Damien nodded, crossing to a sideboard where he poured himself a drink. "Your attorney was quite persistent with those revisions. I believe in negotiating from a position of strength." His lips curved slightly, a quality I hope our child inherits. Our child, the words hung in the air between them, making the purpose of the evening impossible to ignore. Serena's stomach tightened with anxiety. "The medical screening confirmed you're ovulating," Damien continued, his tone clinically detached once more. "The timing is optimal." Serena fought the urge to flee. This was happening. This was really happening. "I know. Your doctor was very thorough." An awkward silence fell. For all his meticulous planning, Damien seemed suddenly uncertain how to proceed. He took a sip of his drink, then set it down untouched. "There's a guest room prepared if you'd prefer to prepare yourself," he said finally. "Or we could have dinner first." The thought of sitting through a meal with the tension hanging between them was unbearable. "I think I'd rather just get this over with," Serena said, then winced at her phrasing. "That came out wrong." "No, it didn't. This is a transaction, not a seduction." Damien's voice was flat, but something flickered in his eyes. "Follow me." He led her down a hallway to what was clearly the master suite, spacious room dominated by a large bed with simple, elegant bedding. The lights were dimmed, and floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the ocean in the distance. "The bathroom is through there if you want privacy," Damien said, gesturing to a door. "Take whatever time you need." Serena nodded, grateful for the momentary escape. The bathroom was larger than her entire former apartment. With a marble shower that could have held 6 people, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just sex. Clinical, contractual sex." She splashed water on her face, took a deep breath, and returned to the bedroom. Damien had removed his shirt, revealing a physique that spoke of regular workouts despite his demanding schedule. He stood by the windows, his back to her, tension evident in his shoulders. "I've never done anything like this before," he admitted without turning. "Despite what you might think, I don't make a habit of arrangements like this." Something in his confession made him seem suddenly human, vulnerable even. Serena approached slowly. "Neither have I." When he turned to face her, the clinical detachment she'd seen in his office was gone. In its place was something raw, almost hungry. "The contract specifies one night," he said, his voice lower than before. "Perhaps we should make it count." Serena had expected mechanical, efficient coupling, the minimum required to achieve their goal. She was wholly unprepared for the way Damien crossed the space between them and seized her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers for permission. "May I?" he asked simply. She nodded, unable to form words as his thumb traced her lower lip. The kiss surprised her not, the hard, dominating pressure she'd expected from a man used to command, but something exploratory, almost questioning. Serena found herself responding, her hands moving to his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her fingertips. What followed was nothing like the clinical procedure outlined in their contract. Damien touched her with reverent attention, learning her body's responses with the same focus he likely gave to complex business negotiations. Clothes were removed slowly, each new expanse of skin explored with hands and lips. When he finally laid her on the bed, Serena was stunned by her own desire. This was supposed to be a transaction, a means to an end. Yet as Damien moved above her, his eyes never leaving hers, something shifted between them. "You're beautiful," he whispered, the words seemingly torn from him against his will. Serena felt a power. She hadn't expected the power to crack the composure of this controlled man, to draw unexpected tenderness from someone who prided himself on emotional detachment. She pulled him closer, her body arching into his, no longer simply accommodating but actively seeking. Their coupling was neither the mechanical act she dreaded nor the cold transaction he'd proposed. Instead, it was heat and connection. Bodies finding a rhythm that belied their status as strangers. Damien whispered her name as they moved together, the sound of it on his lips unexpectedly intimate. When release came, it swept through them both with an intensity that left Serena gasping. Damien held her tightly, his face buried in her neck, his breathing ragged against her skin. For several long moments, they remained entwined. The line between business arrangement and genuine connection blurred beyond recognition. Reality returned slowly. Damien rolled away first, his expression unreadable in the dim light. The careful distance he'd maintained in all their previous interactions seemed impossible now that they'd shared such intimacy. Yet Serena could almost see him rebuilding his walls, brick by brick. "I hope that was satisfactory," he said finally, the formality of his words at odds with the lingering heat between them. Serena almost laughed at the absurdity. "Yes, very effective." "Good." He stood, reaching for his discarded clothes. "You're welcome to stay the night. The guest room is prepared, or you can remain here." The hesitation in his offer told her which he preferred. Despite their unexpected chemistry, Damien clearly needed to re-establish boundaries. "I think the guest room would be best," she said, gathering her own clothes. "We agreed this was just one night." He nodded, relief, and something like disappointment flashing across his face. "Of course, Valeria will show you out in the morning. My schedule requires an early start." Just like that, they were back to business. Except Serena couldn't forget the way he'd looked at her, touched her, whispered her name. Couldn't forget the moment his careful control had shattered, revealing something almost vulnerable beneath. In the guest room, surrounded by luxurious furnishings that would have impressed her just days ago, Serena stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The contract had accounted for every practical aspect of their arrangement: financial support, medical care, legal rights. What it hadn't accounted for was chemistry, connection, the possibility that what should have been clinical might instead be complicated by something dangerously close to desire. It was just sex, she told herself firmly. Good sex, but still just a means to an end. Yet, as sleep finally claimed her, Serena couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The neat, contractual arrangement they'd agreed to had just become infinitely more complex, and neither of them had thought to include a clause covering unexpected attraction. In the morning, Damien was gone, as promised, leaving Valeria to escort her to the waiting car. The assistant's expression revealed nothing, though Serena wondered how much she knew or guessed about what had transpired. "Mr. Knight asked me to provide you with this," Valeria said, handing Serena a small bag containing a morning-after pill. The contract specifies trying to conceive, but he wanted to ensure you had options. Serena stared at the pill, surprised by this unexpected consideration. After a moment's hesitation, she handed it back. The contract specifies trying to conceive, she repeated. I intend to honor my end of the bargain. Valeria's professional mask slipped briefly, revealing something like respect. Very well. The car will take you wherever you'd like to go. As the elevator descended, Serena placed a hand on her stomach, wondering if a new life had already begun, taking form within her. If so, would it have Damien's penetrating gray eyes, his determined chin, her own stubborn streak? The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange calm. Whatever happened next, pregnancy or not. Complications or smooth sailing, she'd faced the most difficult part. Spending a night with a man who saw her as a means to an end. What she hadn't expected was that she might see glimpses of something more in him, something human beneath the billion-dollar armor, something that made her wonder if the clinical arrangement they'd signed might prove far messier than either had anticipated. Chapter 4. Unexpected Complications. Serena stared at the pregnancy test on her bathroom counter. The 2 pink lines unmistakable even from across the room. 3 weeks after her night with Damien, she had confirmation. She was pregnant with a billionaire's baby. She'd taken the test at the earliest possible moment, though Damien's contract stipulated she should immediately contact his private physician for official confirmation. The doctor had scheduled her for later that morning, but Serena needed this moment alone with the knowledge before it became another clause in their agreement. Her hand drifted to her still flat stomach. Was it real? A tiny cluster of cells now growing inside her. Half hers, half his warm cafe owner, half cold corporate titan. What have I gotten you into, little one? She whispered. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Lila, calling for the 3rd time that morning. Did you take it? Her friend asked without preamble. It's positive. A long pause. How do you feel? I don't know. Serena sat on the edge of her bathtub. The funds from Damien had allowed her to rent a modest but comfortable apartment while she began the process of rebuilding her cafe. Scared. Overwhelmed. Weirdly okay. The contract is clear. I know exactly what happens next. Have you told him yet? No? I'll tell him after the doctor confirms it. 2 hours later, sitting in the plush office of Dr. Abigail Lee, Serena received that confirmation, along with a folder of prenatal vitamins, dietary guidelines, and a schedule of appointments that seemed excessive for someone only 3 weeks pregnant. Mr. Knight has arranged for you to have the most comprehensive prenatal care available, Dr. Lee explained. Her manner professional but kind. I'll be overseeing everything personally. Is that standard practice? Serena asked, flipping through the detailed care plan. For my VIP patients, yes. The doctor's careful phrasing made it clear she understood the unusual nature of the arrangement. Would you like me to inform Mr. Knight of the confirmation, or would you prefer to do so yourself? Serena hesitated. According to their contract, notification should go through official channels, doctors, lawyers, assistants, the sterile path, but something about their night together made that feel wrong. I'll tell him, she decided. Can you send him the medical report afterward? Dr. Lee nodded. Of course. Outside the medical building, Serena paused on the sidewalk, phone in hand. She had Damien's direct number, given to her for pregnancy-related emergencies only, but had never used it. Taking a deep breath, she dialed. He answered on the 2nd ring. Serena. His voice betrayed no surprise, despite the fact she'd never called him before. Is everything all right? Yes, She hesitated, suddenly aware of how intimate this news felt despite the clinical nature of their arrangement. I just left Dr. Lee's office. The test is positive. I'm pregnant. Silence stretched across the line, long enough that Serena wondered if they'd been disconnected. Then, a single exhaled breath. You're certain? Blood test confirmed it. About 3 weeks along. Another pause. How are you feeling? The question surprised her. Their contract detailed medical care and financial support, but personal concern hadn't been part of the arrangement. Physically, I'm fine. A little tired. No morning sickness yet. Good. That's good. His voice sounded different, less controlled. Perhaps I'll have Valeria release the next payment immediately. The funds for your cafe reconstruction, as promised in the contract. Confirmation of pregnancy triggered the release of the first major payment. $500,000 to begin rebuilding Brooksflow Cafe while she carried his child. Thank you, Serena said. She waited for him to end the call, to retreat back to the safety of their business arrangement, but instead heard what sounded like him pacing. "I'd like to meet," he said abruptly, "to discuss next steps. The contract is pretty clear about next steps. Nevertheless, I prefer to confirm arrangements in person. Dinner tonight, if you're available." Serena frowned at her phone. Their agreement didn't specify ongoing dinners or meetings beyond necessary medical appointments, which he wasn't even required to attend. "I've already started meeting with contractors about the cafe rebuild," she said, unsure why she felt the need to explain herself. "My schedule is pretty full. Badian, I'll send a car." It wasn't quite a command, but close enough to irritate her. "Fine. Text me the restaurant details. I can drive myself. A pause. It would be at my residence. More private." The memory of his penthouse and his bedroom flashed vividly in her mind. "I'd prefer a public place." She could almost hear his frown. "Very well. Merida at 8. I'll make reservations." Merida was among the most exclusive restaurants in Miami. Even at the height of her pre-hurricane success, Serena wouldn't have been able to get a table there without weeks of advance notice. "I'll be there," she agreed, ending the call before he could issue any more quasi-commands. Within minutes, her phone pinged with notifications. The substantial deposit to her account, a confirmation of her dinner reservation, and a detailed prenatal vitamin subscription that would deliver to her door weekly. Damian Knight might be unexpectedly interested in meeting, but he was still approaching her pregnancy like a well-managed business venture. The rest of the day passed in a blur of contractor meetings at her cafe site. The funds from Damian meant she could not only rebuild, but improve better kitchen equipment. A small expansion into the vacant space next door, upgraded furnishings. As she reviewed plans with the construction manager, Serena found herself temporarily forgetting the strange circumstances that had made this restoration possible, until her phone pinged with another notification. A grocery delivery service had been set up in her name, with a curated selection of pregnancy-approved foods scheduled for weekly delivery. "I don't remember agreeing to this," she muttered, scrolling through the elaborate meal plans someone had created for her. By the time she arrived at Merida that evening, Serena's initial gratitude had curdled into irritation. Damian was already seated at a secluded corner table when the maitre d' led her through the dimly lit restaurant. He stood as she approached, his eyes taking in the simple black dress she'd chosen. "You look well," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for the cafe funds," Serena replied, getting straight to business as she sat. "The contractor started drawing up plans today." Damian nodded, signaling a waiter who immediately appeared with sparkling water for her, and what looked like scotch for him. "I've taken the liberty of arranging some additional services to ensure your health and comfort during the pregnancy." "Yes, I noticed grocery delivery, vitamin subscriptions. A prenatal yoga class membership I didn't ask for." She met his eyes directly. "The contract specified medical care and a monthly stipend. It didn't mention you micromanaging my life." Something flashed in his gray eye, surprise, perhaps, at being challenged. "I'm ensuring optimal conditions for my child's development." "Our child," Serena corrected. "At least biologically, and while I appreciate the thought, I'm perfectly capable of managing my own nutrition and activities." Damian leaned back slightly, studying her. "Most women would appreciate such conveniences. I'm not most women, and I didn't agree to surrender my autonomy along with my eggs." She took a sip of water. "If you want to help, ask what I need instead of assuming." For a moment, he looked ready to argue, but then his expression shifted into something almost like respect. "Very well. What do you need, Serena?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "I need to maintain some control over my life. This situation is already strange enough without feeling like I'm being monitored and managed." Damian nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Though you should know the prenatal dietary guidelines came from Dr. Lee, not me. I have her recommendations in writing. I don't need them delivered to my doorstep in the form of pre-selected groceries." A waiter approached with menus, but Damian waved him away. "We'll need a few more minutes." When they were alone again, he leaned forward. "There's something else we should discuss." Serena tensed. "What?" "Security." His expression turned serious. "Once news of your pregnancy becomes public knowledge, you may face unwanted attention. I've arranged for discreet security personnel to—" "Absolutely not," Serena interrupted. "I'm not having bodyguards following me around. This isn't negotiable." The businessman was back, his tone firm. "My position makes anyone connected to me a potential target. That now includes you and, more importantly, my child." "Our child," Serena corrected again, more forcefully this time. and I didn't sign up to be followed by men in dark suits. The security team is professional and unobtrusive. You'll hardly notice them. That's not the point. Serena fought to keep her voice, even despite her rising irritation. The point is, you're making decisions about my life without consulting me first. Damien's jaw tightened. These aren't arbitrary decisions. They're necessary precautions. Something in his expressiona genuine concern beneath the authoritative exterior made Serena pause. This wasn't just about control. He was actually worried. How about a compromise? She suggested. Security when I'm at public events or meetings related to the cafe opening, but not for my day-to-day activities. He frowned. That leaves significant vulnerability. It's that or nothing, Serena said firmly. I won't live in a bubble for the next 8 months. Their standoff was interrupted by the waiter's return. This time, Damien allowed him to present the menus and recite the evening specials. As they ordered, Serena noticed Damien subtly directing the waiter away from certain dishes he clearly deemed inappropriate for her condition. I can order for myself, she said once the waiter had gone. Of course. Of course. Damien had the grace to look slightly abashed. Old habits controlling everything around you, protecting my interests. He took a sip of his drink. Though I concede I may be approaching this situation too clinically, the admission surprised her. You think? A hint of a smile touched his lips. Our arrangement is unusual. I'm not accustomed to sharing decision-making when it comes to important projects. I'm not a project, Serena said quietly, and neither is this baby. Something flickered in his eyes, discomfort, perhaps, or realization. No, you're not. He set his glass down carefully. I apologize if my actions have seemed overbearing. My intention was to provide support, not to control. The apology, however qualified, was unexpected. Serena studied him across the table, remembering the flashes of vulnerability she'd glimpsed during their night together. Beneath the billionaire exterior was a man used to maintaining control at all costs. A man who was now facing perhaps the one situation in life that couldn't be managed with money and power alone. How about this? She offered. You can make suggestions about security, health measures, whatever else concerns you, but they remain suggestions until we discuss them together. Damien considered this, his expression thoughtful. That's reasonable. He reached into his jacket and produced a small box. Which brings me to this. Serena eyed the box warily. What is it? Open it. Inside was a sleek smartphone. I have a phone, she said, confused. This one has enhanced security features and a direct line to my security team, if needed. He held up a hand as she started to protest. A suggestion only. For your consideration. Serena couldn't help the small smile that formed. You're learning. I adapt quickly to new parameters. There was that hint of a smile again, transforming his usually stern features. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Damien surprised her by asking detailed questions about the cafe rebuild, not just cursory interest, but specific inquiries about her vision, her menu plans, her staffing strategy. You seem genuinely interested in the cafe, she observed. I'm interested in anything that matters to the mother of my child. He paused, then added more quietly, and I've been impressed by your business acumen. Few people would have developed such a comprehensive rebuilding strategy so quickly. The compliment, delivered without flattery or agenda, caught her off guard. Thank you. As dinner concluded, Serena realized they'd somehow shifted from adversaries negotiating terms to something almost like partners discussing shared concerns. It was disconcerting how easily conversation flowed once they moved past their power struggle. Outside the restaurant, his driver waited with the car. May I offer you a ride home? Damien asked. I drove myself. Serena reminded him. He nodded, seemingly reluctant to end the evening. I'd like to see the cafe site, perhaps tomorrow, if you're agreeable. Another unexpected request. Why? Professional curiosity. He hesitated. And personal interest. Serena considered refusing, but found herself nodding instead. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. I'll text you the address. I know the address. At her raised eyebrow, he added, due diligence, remember? As she turned to leave, he caught her hand the first time he'd touched her since their night together. The contact sent an unwelcome spark through her. Serena, his voice had softened. Thank you for this. His eyes dropped briefly to her stomach. For a moment, they stood connected, the busy restaurant entrance fading around them. Then Serena gently withdrew her hand. Good night, Damien. Walking to her car, she felt his eyes following her. This wasn't what she'd signed up for, this strange, evolving relationship that kept shifting beneath her feet. The contract had been clear. Conception, pregnancy, delivery, payment clinical, straightforward, emotionally detached. Nothing had prepared her for a Damien Knight who sent prenatal vitamins, asked about her business, and looked at her with something that went beyond their contractual obligation. As she drove home, one hand unconsciously drifted to her stomach. "Well, little one," she murmured, "things just got a lot more complicated." Chapter 5. Power Struggles. 6 weeks later, Brooks Flow Cafe was taking shape again. The hurricane debris had been cleared, new walls stood where destruction had been, and the custom-designed counter was being installed. Standing in what would soon be her kitchen, Serena couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and gratitude. The tile delivery is scheduled for Thursday, Antonio, her contractor, said as he reviewed the timeline, and the espresso machine should arrive next Monday. "Perfect," Serena replied, one hand unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. At 9 weeks pregnant, she didn't look any different, but she felt different, more tired, occasionally queasy, and increasingly aware of the life growing inside her. Antonio followed her gaze to the large front windows, where a black sedan had been parked for the past hour. "Your investor checking up on progress again?" Serena sighed. "Something like that." Despite their agreement about security only at public events, she'd noticed the discreet but unmistakable presence of Damien's Pioplanat, following her exactly, but happening to be wherever she went. So far, she'd chosen not to confront him about it. Her phone vibrated with a calendar notification: prenatal appointment tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Below it was a text message from Damien: "We'll join you for the ultrasound. Car will pick you up at 9:30. Not a question, a statement. Serena typed back: "I can drive myself. See you there if you'd like to attend." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, "As you wish. I'll meet you at Dr. Lee's office." A small victory in their ongoing power struggle. Since confirming her pregnancy, Damien had inserted himself into her life in ways the contract never specified, calling daily for updates, arranging deliveries of pregnancy-appropriate foods, insisting on reviewing the cafe reconstruction plans for safety considerations. The cafe itself was progressing faster than expected, largely because Damien had connections with suppliers and contractors that moved Serena to the front of every waiting list. She appreciated the help, but resented the implication that she couldn't manage on her own. "Miss Brooks?" Antonio's voice pulled her back to the present. "The lighting fixture chrome or brass finishes?" "Brass," she decided. "Warmer aesthetic." After finalizing the remaining details, Serena left the construction site, deliberately walking past the black sedan. The driver studiously avoided eye contact, confirming her suspicions. Shaking her head, she got into her own car and headed to Lila's apartment for their weekly dinner. "He still having you followed?" Lila asked later, as they sat on her balcony, the Miami sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Not officially following, just conveniently positioned wherever I go." Serena stabbed at her salad. "It's infuriating, but also kind of sweet," Lila suggested with a raised eyebrow. "He's clearly concerned about you." "He's concerned about his investment," Serena corrected, though she wasn't entirely convinced of her own words. Damien's behavior went beyond prudent monitoring of a business arrangement. "Speaking of which, how was your dinner with him last week?" Lila leaned forward eagerly, like a business meeting with undertones of something else. Serena couldn't quite define the strange energy that existed between them now. "He spent 20 minutes discussing the nutritional benefits of different prenatal supplements, then asked about my grandmother's recipes for the cafe." "Sounds riveting," Lila laughed. "The strangest part is that he seems genuinely interested, not just making conversation." Serena set down her fork. "Yesterday, he sent over a rare Cuban cookbook from the 1950s that he happened to find at an auction." "Who does that?" "A man who's developing feelings for the mother of his child." Serena shook her head firmly. "That's not part of our arrangement. He wants an heir, not a relationship." "Sometimes what we want and what we get are different things," Lila said wisely. The next morning at Dr. Lee's office, Serena arrived to find Damien already waiting in a private room, reviewing emails on his phone. He stood immediately when she entered. "You're looking well," he said, his eyes scanning her as if checking for visible changes. "I feel fine," she replied. "Morning sickness hasn't been too bad." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Dr. Lee entered with a warm smile. "Good morning. We're doing an ultrasound today to check development and get a more precise due date." As Serena lay back on the examination table, she was acutely aware of Damien standing nearby. his usual commanding presence somehow subdued in this medical setting. When Dr. Lee applied the cold gel to her stomach, she flinched slightly. "Sorry about that," the doctor said. "Let's see what we've got here." The room filled with a rapid whooshing sound, the baby's heartbeat. Serena's own heart seemed to stop for a moment, as the reality of the life inside her became undeniably concrete. "There's your baby, Doctor," Lee said, pointing to a small shape on the screen, measuring right on track for 9 weeks. Strong heartbeat. "It's so tiny," Serena whispered. She glanced at Damien and was startled by his expression, a mixture of awe and vulnerability she'd never seen on his face before. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his usual mask of control completely gone. "That's our child," he said softly, as if to himself. Something shifted in the room, the emotional weight of the moment transcending their contractual relationship. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. It was a life they had created together, however clinical the circumstances. The moment broke when Dr. Lee finished the examination and handed Serena tissues to wipe away the gel. "Everything looks perfect. I'll print some images for you both." As Serena sat up and adjusted her clothing, Damien seemed to collect himself, the businessman returning as he asked Dr. Lee detailed questions about development milestones and optimal nutrition. In the hallway afterward, he held the envelope containing the ultrasound images, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Would you like these? I can have copies made. We can share them," Serena said, surprised by her own generosity. "You keep those. I have the real thing with me all the time anyway." She gestured to her stomach with a small smile. Damien nodded, carefully tucking the envelope into his suit jacket. "I have a meeting with the hospital board at noon, but I'd like to see the cafe progress afterward. Would 4 o'clock work for you?" Again, not quite a question, not quite a command. Serena considered refusing on principle, but found herself saying, "4 is fine. I'll meet you there." That afternoon, Damien arrived precisely on time, having exchanged his formal suit for more casual dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt. Even in relaxed clothing, he exuded authority as he examined the reconstruction. "The support beams should be hurricane-reinforced," he said, inspecting the framework, "and you'll want impact-resistant glass for these front windows." Serena crossed her arms. "The contractor already recommended those upgrades. We're implementing them." "Good." Damien nodded approvingly. "What about a backup generator?" "Power outages are common during storm season, already in the plans." She couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Contrary to what you might think, I can manage a business renovation without supervision." He turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. "I never suggested otherwise. Your actions suggest otherwise. The daily check-ins, the unannounced visits, the security detail I explicitly said I didn't want." The frustration she'd been containing for weeks finally boiled over. "This isn't what we agreed to, Damien. Circumstances change," he said simply. "The contract covered the basic arrangement. It couldn't anticipate every detail. It certainly didn't anticipate you micromanaging my life." Her voice rose enough that Antonio glanced over curiously from across the room. Damien took her elbow gently, guiding her toward the back office area for privacy. The touch sent an unwelcome spark through her arm. "I am not micromanaging," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I'm taking an interest in the well-being of my child and, by extension, you. An interest is asking how I'm feeling. What you're doing is surveillance and interference." His jaw tightened. "You agreed to security at public events. The cafe reconstruction qualifies. A car parked outside my apartment at night doesn't." Serena countered. "Yes, I noticed. Every night this week." For a moment, Damien looked almost abashed, then his expression hardened again. "My child deserves protection. So does its mother. I am not just a vessel for your heir." The words came out louder than she intended, echoing in the unfinished space. "I'm a person with my own life, my own business, my own decisions to make. You can't control everything, Damien, no matter how much money you have." They stood facing each other, the tension between them electric. His gray eyes had darkened with anger, but there was something else there, to a heat that had nothing to do with their argument. "I don't aim to control you," he said finally, his voice dropping. "I aim to protect what matters to me." "And what exactly matters to you? Just the baby, or something else?" Serena challenged, stepping closer. The air between them seemed to thin. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her, and worse. She wanted him to. The memory of their night together flashed vividly in her mind. Instead, Damien stepped back, his expression closing off. "The agreement matters. Our child matters. The rest is irrelevant." "Is it?" Serena pressed, Then why are you here, Damien? Why the cookbook? Why daily calls that have nothing to do with the pregnancy? I don't have to explain myself to you. His voice was cold now. The vulnerable man from the doctor's office completely gone. Actually, you do, when your actions affect my life. Serena refused to be intimidated. We have a contract, not a relationship. You made that distinction very clear from the beginning. Something flickered in his eyeshirt, perhaps, though she couldn't imagine why. If my interest in your well-being is so offensive, I'll scale back. You'll receive updates through Dr. Lee and Valeria going forward. The formal tone felt like a slap after weeks of almost friendly interactions. Fine, that's what we agreed to anyway. Fine. He turned to leave, then paused. The security stays, non négociable. Before she could argue further, he was gone. His long strides carrying him quickly out of the cafe and into the waiting car. Serena stood in the middle of her half-finished cafe, simultaneously relieved and bereft. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Professional distance, adherence to the original agreement. No complications. Yet, as she watched his car pull away, she couldn't ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. Somewhere along the way, their clinical arrangement had developed undertones of something else, something neither of them had bargained for. That evening, her phone remained silent, no texts asking about her dinner choices, no calls checking on her symptoms, no updates about prenatal vitamins or cafe supplies. Just as she'd insisted, just as they'd agreed, Serena placed her hand on her stomach, where their child grew, oblivious to the complicated emotions swirling between its parents. Your father is the most infuriating man I've ever met, she told the baby. Controlling, demanding, impossible. She paused, remembering the look on Damien's face when he saw the ultrasound, that moment of pure, unguarded wonder. But there might be more to him than that, she admitted softly, and that's what scares me. Chapter 6. Forbidden feelings. 2 weeks of professional distance had left Serena both relieved and strangely bereft. True to his word, Damien had scaled back his involvement to formal updates through Valeria and Dr. Lee. No more surprise visits, no more daily calls, no more unsolicited deliveries of pregnancy supplements. The security detail remained, however, a silent, dark car that appeared wherever she went. She'd given up fighting that particular battle. Brooks Flow Cafe was nearly ready for its grand reopening, scheduled for next weekend. The renovation had surpassed her original vision, partly due to Damien's connections that had expedited permits and deliveries. Though she was reluctant to give him credit, the sign installation is complete, Antonio announced as Serena inspected the newly tiled kitchen floor. Want to see? Outside, the neon Brooks Flow sign glowed against the twilight sky, its blue letters a perfect match to her grandmother's favorite color. Beneath it, in smaller script, inspired by Elena. Tears pricked at Serena's eyes. Her grandmother would have loved this place bigger and better than before, but still carrying the spirit of her recipes and traditions. It's perfect, she whispered. Miss Brooks? One of the workmen approached. There's a delivery for you in the back office. A package sat on her desk, a small, elegant box tied with ribbon. No card, no note, but she knew immediately who it was from. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant, shaped like a flowing river, with a tiny blue stone, where the cafe would be located on a map. It was understated, elegant, and exactly to her taste. Damien had been paying more attention than she'd realized. Her phone rang. Lila. Did you hear the news? Her friend asked without preamble. What news? Damien Knight was in a car accident last night. It's all over the business channels. Serena's heart stuttered. Is he? He's okay, apparently, but they say he's at Miami General. After ending the call, Serena stared at the pendant in her palm. The right thing would be to maintain the professional distance they'd established. Send flowers, perhaps, with a formal note wishing him well. Instead, she found herself driving to Miami General, the security car following discreetly behind. At the hospital, she was initially rebuffed at the reception desk family, only for Mr. Knight until Valeria appeared in the hallway, spotted her, and approached. Miss Brooks, this is unexpected. I heard about the accident. I wanted to check on him. The words sounded inadequate even to her own ears. Valeria studied her thoughtfully. He's in a private suite on the 5th floor, room 527. I'll tell security to expect you. The private room was more like a luxury hotel suite than a hospital room. Damien sat propped up in bed, his laptop open despite a bandage on his forehead and his left arm in a sling. He looked up as she entered, surprise flashing briefly across his face. "Serena, I heard about the accident." She stood awkwardly near the door. "Are you all right?" "3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a mild concussion." He closed the laptop. "Nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" she repeated with a small, disbelieving laugh. Most people would consider that fairly serious. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've had worse." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Serena gestured to the pendant around her neck. "Thank you for this. It's beautiful. The cafe reopens next week." It seemed appropriate. His eyes lingered on the pendant, then moved to her stomach, which now showed the slightest curve beneath her dress. "How are you feeling?" "Good. The second trimester is apparently the easy part." She moved closer to his bed. "What happened with the accident?" Damien's expression darkened. "Drunk driver ran a red light. Hit the car on my side." He gestured to his injuries. "Could have been worse if not for the vehicle's safety features. I'm glad you're okay." The words came out softer than she intended. He studied her face. "Why are you here, Serena? Our last conversation made it clear you preferred professional distance." It was a fair question. Why had she rushed to the hospital instead of sending the appropriate formal well wishes? "I don't know," she admitted. "It seemed like the right thing to do. Because of the contract?" "No." She met his eyes. "Because, despite everything, I don't actually want you hurt or suffering." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a vulnerability she rarely glimpsed. "I have few visitors," he said after a moment. "Valeria, my legal team, business associates, no family, no friends." Really, the admission surprised her. For all his wealth and power, Damien Knight was fundamentally alone. No family at all? He hesitated, then gestured to the chair beside his bed. Serena sat, setting her purse aside. "My mother died when I was 8. Cancer." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes held old pain. "My father was not a kind man, brilliant in business. Abysmal as a parent. He believed emotional attachment was weakness. Affection was earned through achievement, never freely given." "That sounds awful," Serena said quietly. "It was effective. I built my first successful company at 22, largely to prove him wrong." A bitter smile crossed his face. "He died before I could show him what I'd accomplished. Heart attack at his desk, working, of course." "I'm sorry." She hesitated, then asked, "Is that why you want a child? To prove you can be a better father than yours was?" Damien looked surprised by her insight. "Perhaps, but also to create something lasting. Companies rise and fall, buildings crumble, but family." He trailed off, then added quietly, "Family should be forever." "Should be," Serena agreed, thinking of her own grandmother, who had shown her unconditional love after her parents died. "But it takes work and emotional presence. Something I'm not known for," he acknowledged, a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. "Hence the contract, clear boundaries, defined expectations. And yet, here we are, having a personal conversation in your hospital room." Serena couldn't help the small smile that formed not exactly what either of us planned. "No," he agreed, his eyes holding hers. "It's not." The air between them felt charged, the memory of their one night together suddenly vivid and present. Damien broke the tension first. "The cafe's everything ready for the reopening?" Grateful for the subject change, Serena described the final preparations, the staff she'd hired, the updated menu that honored her grandmother's recipes, while adding contemporary twists. To her surprise, he listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about her business strategy and marketing plans. "You've thought this through thoroughly," he said, sounding impressed. "Most reopenings after disasters fail within a year. Yours won't." "That's oddly encouraging. Coming from someone who's seen my financial history, your previous setback was circumstantial, not operational." He reached for a glass of water, wincing as the movement jarred his ribs. Instinctively, Serena moved to help, holding the glass for him. For a moment, their hands overlapped, the simple contact sending warmth through her fingers. "Thank you," he said, his voice lower than before. She stepped back quickly. "I should go. You need rest." "Serena," he seemed about to say something important, then shook his head. "Thank you for coming. It was unexpected. Well, I'm carrying your child. I have a vested interest in your continued existence." She tried for a light tone, but the words felt heavier than intended. "Is that the only interest you have?" The question hung between them, more vulnerable than anything he'd asked before. Serena's breath caught. This was dangerous territory. Acknowledging the undercurrent that had been building between them since their night together. "I should go," she repeated, gathering her purse. "Get some rest, Damien. I'm glad you're okay." She felt his eyes on her back as she left. questions unanswered, feelings unacknowledged. 3 days later, Serena was reviewing the final catering order for the reopening when a call came from Dr. Lee's office. "Miss Brooks, we've noticed some anomalies in your latest blood work. Nothing alarming, but Dr. Lee would like you to come in tomorrow for additional testing." Fear gripped her heart. Anomalies? What kind of anomalies? "Is the baby okay?" "The baby appears fine on all scans." The nurse assured her, "This is likely just a precautionary measure." Dr. Lee prefers to be thorough. After hanging up, Serena stood frozen, one hand protectively covering her stomach. The baby had become real to her, not just a clause in a contract, but a life she already loved fiercely. Without thinking, she dialed Damien's number. "Serena," he answered immediately, concern evident in his voice. "What's wrong?" The fact that he knew something was wrong from just her call told her how rare it was for her to contact him directly. "Dr. Lee wants additional tests tomorrow. Something about anomalies in my blood work." Her voice shook slightly despite her attempt to remain calm. "What time is the appointment?" His tone shifted to problem-solving mode. 10 in the morning. "I'll meet you there." It wasn't a question, and this time she didn't want it to be. "Okay," she agreed softly. "Serena," his voice gentled, "try not to worry. Dr. Lee is exceptionally cautious. This is likely nothing serious. I know. She stopped, unwilling to admit how scared she felt. "You're not alone in this," he said, seeming to understand her unspoken fear. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." The "we" caught her off guard, so different from the clinical, detached language of their contract. This was Damien offering partnership, support, shared responsibility. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Serena could barely sleep, worry gnawing at her despite rational attempts to remain calm. Around midnight, her phone chimed with a text message from Damien. "The clinic opens at 8 o'clock at a.m. I've arranged for Dr. Lee to see you first thing. Car will pick you up at 7:30, if that's acceptable." For once, his controlling tendencies felt comforting rather than intrusive. She texted back a simple, "Thank you." His response came immediately. "Try to rest. Stress isn't good for either of you." The concern behind the words warmed something in her chest, something she'd been trying to ignore since their night together. Despite her resistance, despite the contract, despite his sometimes overbearing nature, Damien had somehow begun to matter to her as more than just the father of her child. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, as she finally drifted toward sleep, she felt a strange sense of comfort in knowing she wouldn't face tomorrow's uncertainty alone. In the darkness of her bedroom, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly, Serena finally admitted to herself what she'd been denying for weeks. Her feelings for Damien Knight had grown far beyond the boundaries of their carefully constructed agreement, and that was the most frightening complication of all. Chapter 7. The betrayal. The blood test results had been a false alarm. After a tense morning at Dr. Lee's office, they'd learned the anomalies were simply vitamin deficiencies, easily corrected with adjusted supplements. The relief had momentarily united Serena and Damien, his hand finding hers as Dr. Lee delivered the good news. That small moment of connection had shifted something between them. Over the following weeks, they'd established a fragile truce. Damien was less controlling, Serena less defensive. He attended the Brooksflow Cafe reopening, standing quietly in the background as she welcomed guests and reveled in the successful revival of her dream. The cafe was thriving. At 16 weeks pregnant, Serena had settled into a comfortable routine, managing the business while preparing for the baby. Damien called regularly, their conversations gradually extending beyond pregnancy updates to genuine exchanges about their days. She was almost happy until the envelope arrived. Lila had brought it to the cafe during the lunch rush, a thick manila envelope that had been delivered to Serena's old address. Probably just junk mail, her friend had said. Hours later, alone in her office, Serena finally opened it. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Photos of her entering doctor appointments, shopping for groceries, meeting with suppliers, opening the cafe each morning, and accompanying the photos, a detailed report of her daily movements for the past month, times, locations, people she'd met with. Her hands trembled as she flipped through pages of surveillance notes. The level of detail was chilling. What she'd ordered at restaurants, conversations overheard in public places, even notes about her sleeping habits based on when lights went on and off in her apartment. At the bottom of the last page, a simple signature. Knight Enterprises Security Division, Weekly Surveillance Report. Serena felt physically ill. This wasn't protection. This was invasion, every moment of privacy violated, every movement tracked and documented. Without thinking, she grabbed her keys and drove straight to Damien's office tower. The security guards recognized her immediately, allowing her up without the usual verification process. Valeria looked up in surprise as Serena stormed past her desk. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Knight is in a meeting." Serena pushed open his office door without knocking. Damien sat at his desk with two men in suits, all three looking up in shock at her entrance. "Gentlemen, excuse us," she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. To her surprise, Damien immediately nodded to the men. "We'll continue this tomorrow." Once they were alone, she slammed the surveillance report onto his desk. "Explain this." Damien glanced at the papers, his expression carefully neutral. "Where did you get these?" "They were sent to my old address." "Is that really your first question?" Not, "I'm sorry for violating your privacy," or "I apologize for having you followed despite promising not to." "These reports were never meant to reach you," he said, as if that somehow made it better. "So it's fine to spy on me as long as I don't find out about it?" Serena's voice rose. "There are notes about my shower routine in here, Damien. Detailed observations about what time I turn my bedroom lights off." He stood, circling his desk. "The security team is thorough. It's their job to monitor for potential threats and ensure your safety. This goes far beyond security concerns." She flipped to a particularly disturbing page. "Subject appears emotionally agitated after phone call. Consumed entire pint of ice cream while watching television." "That's not security. That's stalking." "I instructed them to be comprehensive," Damien admitted. "Perhaps they were overzealous in their reporting." "Overzealous?" Serena laughed bitterly. "You had people watching me in my most private moments. People documenting my emotional states, my eating habits, my conversations with friends. For your protection." "No." She cut him off sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending this was for my benefit. This was about control, your need to know everything, manage everything, own everything." Something hardened in his expression. "I have enemies, Serena. People who would use any vulnerability against me. You and the baby represent such a vulnerability. We're not possessions to be guarded. We're people." She pressed a hand to her growing bump. "I trusted you. Despite the contract, despite your controlling tendencies, I was starting to believe you actually cared, that we could find a way to co-parent respectfully." "I do care," he insisted, reaching for her hand. She stepped back. "People who care don't violate trust this way." Tears threatened, but she fought them back. "You accessed my medical records too, didn't you? Beyond what Dr. Lee officially shared." His hesitation was answer enough. "God, there's probably nothing about my life you haven't invaded." The realization was crushing. Was anything real, or was I just another asset to be monitored and managed? "You're being irrational," Damien said, his tone shifting to the cold, dismissive one he used in business confrontations. "The pregnancy hormones are clearly affecting your emotional stability." The condescension was the final straw. "And there it is. When you can't defend your actions, dismiss me as a hysterical pregnant woman." Serena gathered the surveillance papers with shaking hands. "We're done here. From now on, we communicate through lawyers. Stay away from me. Stay away from my cafe. And tell your security people that if I see them following me again, I'll file for a restraining order." "That would violate our contract," he said stiffly. "Then I guess I'll see you in court." She turned to leave, then stopped. "I thought I saw something in you, Damien, something beyond the cold businessman. I was wrong." His face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or anger. "You're making a mistake." "No. My mistake was ever thinking you could care about anyone other than yourself." The words were cruel, chosen to hurt, and she saw they hit their mark. As she walked out of his office, past a wide-eyed Valeria, Serena felt something inside her breaking, not just anger or betrayal, but grief for what might have been, the fragile connection they'd been building, the possibility that they might raise their child in some kind of harmonial, destroyed by his fundamental inability to trust, to respect boundaries, to see her as an equal rather than an asset to be controlled. In her car, she finally allowed the tears to come. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from Damien, but she ignored them all. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered to her belly. "We'll figure this out somehow." But as she drove home, Serena wondered how she could ever trust again, not just Damien, but anyone. The man who knew her most intimately, who shared the creation of the life growing inside her, had violated her in ways she couldn't forgive. And the worst part? Despite everything, some traitorous part of her heart still ached for what they'd lost. Chapter 8. Separation. 2 weeks of rigid silence followed the confrontation in Damien's office. True to her word, Serena had blocked his number and instructed her lawyer to handle all communication. The surveillance reports had stopped, or at least, if they continued, she was no longer receiving copies. Brooks Flow Cafe became her sanctuary. At nearly 5 months pregnant, her condition was obvious now. Prompting curious glances and occasional questions from regular customers, she'd crafted a simple story. Yes, she was expecting. No, the father wasn't in the picture. Yes, she was managing just fine on her own. The last part was only partly true. "You need to eat something besides pastries," Lila said one afternoon, watching Serena pick at a croissant behind the counter. "The baby needs actual nutrients." "I had a salad earlier," Serena lied. Unable to admit that her appetite had waned since the confrontation with Damien, Lila's skeptical expression said she wasn't convinced. "Have you heard anything from him?" Only through Sophia. Her lawyer had been fielding constant inquiries from Damien's legal team, requests for medical updates, offers for additional financial support, even a proposal for mediated conversations. "Maybe you should hear him out," Lila suggested carefully. "For the baby's sake, if nothing else." Serena shook her head firmly. "He violated my trust in the most fundamental way. There's no coming back from that." Yet, despite her resolve, she found herself missing him at the strangest moments during ultrasound appointments she now attended alone, when making business decisions she would have once discussed with him, in the quiet evenings when the baby's movements reminded her that, whether she liked it or not, Damien was inextricably part of her life. Miss Brooks, Antonio, now her cafe manager, approached with a concerned expression. "There's someone here asking about purchasing the business again." This had been happening with increasing frequency, representatives from different companies inquiring whether Brooks Flow was for sale. She'd refused each time, but the offers kept getting higher. "Tell them it's not for sale at any price," she said tiredly. After Antonio left, Lila leaned forward. "You don't think Damien is behind these offers, do you?" The thought had occurred to her. It would be just like him, thinking he can buy his way back into my life through the cafe. That evening, as Serena closed up alone, her phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, she would ignore such calls. But something made her answer. "Serena Brooks speaking." "Miss Brooks, this is Valeria Cruz." Serena nearly hung up, but curiosity kept her on the line. "What do you want?" "I'm calling without Mr. Knight's knowledge," Valeria said, her typically composed voice sounding strained. "I thought you should know he's not behind the purchase offers for your cafe." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I've worked for him for 7 years, and I've never seen him like this." A pause. "He's not sleeping. Barely eating. He's withdrawn from most business operations. He sits in his office staring at the ultrasound photos for hours." The image was so at odds with the controlled, commanding Damien, she knew that Serena didn't know how to respond. "The offers for your cafe are coming from Victor Steele," Valeria continued. "Mr. Knight's primary business rival. He's attempting to acquire anything of value to Mr. Knight." "My cafe isn't valuable to Damien," Serena said, confused. "But you are." Valeria's voice softened. "Mr. Knight made Mystica serious ones. I'm not defending his actions, but I thought you should know he's not trying to buy his way back into your life. If anything, he's respecting your wishes for distance to a degree that's concerning those of us who work with him." After hanging up, Serena sat in her darkened cafe, conflicted emotions churning within her. Could she believe Valeria? And even if Damien was truly suffering, did that change what he'd done? The baby kicked sharply, as if offering its own opinion. "I know," she murmured, rubbing her belly. "He's still your father, regardless of what happens between us." The next day, a certified letter arrived from Sophia, her lawyer. Damien's legal team had proposed an amended contract. Opening it cautiously, Serena found herself staring at something unexpected. Not demands or stipulations, but concessions. He was offering to place all security decisions in her hands, to establish transparent medical information sharing that she would control, to triple the final payment amount with no additional conditions. Most surprisingly, he requested only one thing in return: permission to attend the birth of their child, not as a right, but as a privilege she could revoke at any time. "What do you think?" she asked Sophia over the phone. "Legally, it's extremely favorable to you," her lawyer admitted. "He's essentially surrendering most of his contractual leverage, while increasing his financial obligation. From a purely strategic standpoint, you should accept immediately, but it wasn't just about strategy anymore. It was about trust broken and the question of whether it could ever be repaired. "I need time to think," Serena said. That night, unable to sleep, she found herself driving past Damien's office tower. The top floor, his private domain, was still illuminated despite the late hour. Was he there now, sleepless and regretful, as Valeria had suggested? Or was this all an elaborate strategy to regain control? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He's been sleeping in his office for 2 weeks. Hasn't been home once." Valeria's continued communication should have felt like another violation, but instead, it sparked an unwelcome pang of concern. This wasn't the calculating businessman she'd come to know. This was someone unraveling. The thought brought little satisfaction. A week later, at her regular checkup with Dr. Lee, Serena finally asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. "Has he been contacting you about the baby?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "He calls after each appointment for basic updates information he's entitled to under the original agreement, but he's been exceptionally careful not to request details beyond what you've authorized." "And before, when we were closer, was he accessing my records then?" Dr. Lee looked uncomfortable. "He requested comprehensive reports." "Yes, but I should clarify. Your full medical file contains information about the baby's development." His interest seemed genuinely focused on the child's well-being, not personal details about you. The distinction felt important, though Serena wasn't sure why. The violation remained the same, yet context somehow mattered. As she left the medical building, she spotted a familiar figure across the street, Damien himself, sitting in his car, making no attempt to approach or hide his presence. Their eyes met briefly before he started his engine and drove away. Respecting her demand for space, even while clearly desperate for some connection to the pregnancy, the glimpse of him thinner than before, with dark circles visible even from a distance, left her unsettled. This wasn't the behavior of someone trying to control her. This was something else entirely. That evening, after closing the cafe, Serena sat alone with her laptop, finally opening the document she'd been avoiding. The full surveillance report. Reading it carefully now, without the blind rage of her initial discovery, she noticed nuances she'd missed before. The observations weren't focused on controlling her movements or monitoring her personal life. They detailed potential security threats, noting individuals who lingered too long near her apartment, cataloging unfamiliar vehicles, identifying moments when she might be vulnerable to approach by strangers. One note, in particular, caught her attention. Subject appears distressed after phone call. Recommend no intervention but increased monitoring for potential health impacts on pregnancy. They had been watching her, yes, but the intent behind the surveillance suddenly seemed less sinister, more protective if still fundamentally intrusive and wrong. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Did you see the business news? Damien Knight stepped down as CEO today, temporary leave of absence. They're saying health reasons." Alarmed, despite herself, Serena searched for news articles. Every business publication was running the story. The famously driven Damien Knight stepping back from the company he'd built from nothing. The timing, just weeks after their confrontation, couldn't be coincidental. Was this what rejection did to a man who had never experienced it? Or was something else happening, something genuine and painful that she'd been too hurt to see? The baby kicked again, more insistent this time. "I know, little one," she whispered. "It's complicated." She found herself picking up the phone, staring at Damien's blocked number. One tap would unblock it. One call might answer the questions swirling in her mind. Instead, she set the phone down and closed her eyes. Trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired with a single conversation or even an amended contract. Whatever was happening with Damien's genuine remorse or calculated manipulations, she needed to protect herself and her child from further emotional upheaval. Yet, as she placed her hands on her growing belly, feeling the life they'd created together, Serena couldn't silence the small voice wondering if isolation was truly protection or just another form of pain for her, for Damien, and for the child who would be born into their complicated legacy. "We'll figure it out," she promised the baby. Somehow, but the path forward remained as unclear as ever, the separation between what was and what might have been growing wider with each passing day. Chapter 9. Transformation. 3 months had passed since the confrontation in Damien's office. At 7 months pregnant, Serena had settled into a new rhythm, managing the increasingly successful cafe, preparing for the baby, and navigating the strange limbo of her relationship with Damien. They hadn't spoken directly, but the rigid separation had gradually softened. After careful consideration, she'd accepted his amended contract, though she'd added her own stipulation. Any security measures would be discussed openly, with final decisions resting with her. His acceptance had been immediate. Through their lawyers, they'd established a communication system for pregnancy updates. Serena would send weekly summaries, and Damien would respond with any questions, always careful to keep his inquiries relevant and respectful. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. "You're looking good, doctor," Lee said during Serena's checkup, reviewing the latest scans. "The baby is developing perfectly. Have you been thinking about your birth plan?" Serena nodded. "I'll deliver here with you attending. I want an epidural if needed. And I've decided that Damien can be present if he still wants to be." The doctor smiled. "I think that decision will mean a great deal to him." Later that day, as Serena reviewed inventory orders at the cafe, her phone rang with a now familiar number. Valeria. Over the past months, Damien's assistant had become an unexpected ally, providing careful updates that walked the line between professional courtesy and genuine concern. From her, Serena had learned that Damien had begun therapy, something she never would have expected from the controlled, emotionally distant man she'd first met. "Miss Brooks, I wanted to let you know that Mr. Knight has returned to limited work duties," Valeria said. "He asked me to assure you that this won't impact any of your agreements. Thank you for letting me know." Serena hesitated, then asked, "How is he?" A brief pause. "Better. The therapy seems to be helping. He's addressing some deep-seated issues regarding control and trust." After hanging up, Serena sat quietly, processing this information. The Damien she'd first met would never have admitted needing psychological help, would have seen it as weakness. This willingness to confront his issues suggested a transformation she hadn't thought possible. That evening, she found herself composing an email directly to him, the first personal communication since their fight. "Damien, Doctor. Lee says the baby is developing well. I've attached the latest scan. I've been thinking about the birth plan and wanted to let you know that I'm comfortable with you being present when the baby arrives, if you still wish to be there. I hope you're doing well." Serena. Simple, direct, but a significant step beyond the formal updates they'd been exchanging through intermediaries. His response came hours later, well after midnight. "Serena, thank you for the scan and for allowing me to be present for the birth. It means more than I can express. I'm working to be better not just for the baby, but for myself. The person I was, the way I treated you, reflected patterns I'm only now beginning to understand. That's no excuse, but perhaps some context. I hope the cafe continues to thrive. From a distance, it appears you've created something remarkable. Damien." The email left her strangely moved. There was humility in his words, a self-awareness that the old Damien would have considered beneath him. 2 weeks later, as Serena closed the cafe alone after a busy Saturday, a sharp pain gripped her abdomen different from the practice contractions she'd been experiencing. She gasped, clutching the counter as another wave hit, stronger this time. Something was wrong. With trembling hands, she called Dr. Lee's emergency line. "I'm having severe abdominal pain," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's not like the Braxton Hicks contractions. This feels worse. Go directly to the hospital," Dr. Lee instructed. "I'll meet you in the emergency department. This could be placental abruption. We need to assess immediately." Terror washed over Serena as she realized the seriousness of the situation. Placental abruption could threaten both her life and the baby's. She called Lila, but it went to voicemail. Her friend was working the night shift at the hospital. Hands shaking, she called a rideshare, not trusting herself to drive as another wave of pain hit, stronger than before. Then, without thinking, she called Damien. He answered immediately. "Serena, are you all right? I need to get to the hospital." She managed through gritted teeth. "Doctor, Lee thinks it might be placental abruption. I've called a car. But where are you?" The sharpness in his voice was pure focus, not control. "The cafe." I was closing up when another wave of pain cut her words short. "I'm 10 minutes away. Don't move." The line went dead. 8 minutes later, Damien's car screeched to a halt outside Brooksflow. He rushed in to find Serena leaning against the counter, face pale with pain. "Can you walk?" he asked, already supporting her elbow. She nodded weakly, allowing him to guide her to his car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear, Damien breaking every speed limit while keeping one hand reassuringly on hers. "The baby will be fine," he said firmly, as if willing it to be true. You'll both be fine. At the hospital, Dr. Lee was waiting. Everything happened in a rush then. Serena on a gurney, nurses surrounding her, monitors being attached to track the baby's heartbeat. Partial abruption, doctor. Lee confirmed after examination, we need to stop the bleeding and monitor you both closely. If the abruption worsens, we may need an emergency C-section. Serena gripped Damien's hand, terror overriding any lingering resentment. It's too early. The baby's not ready. 7 months is viable, he said, his voice steadier than she could have managed. But let's not borrow trouble. Follow Dr. A.G. Lee's instructions and take one moment at a time. In the hours that followed, Serena was given medication to slow the bleeding and steroids to help the baby's lungs develop, just in case early delivery became necessary. Through it all, Damien remained by her side, a calm presence in the chaos. When she was finally stabilized and moved to a private room for monitoring, he pulled a chair beside her bed. You should go home, she said weakly. They say I'll be here for at least 2 days, maybe longer. I'm staying. His tone brooked no argument, yet held no dominance, just quiet determination. Damien, not because I'm trying to control the situation, he clarified quickly, because I need to be here for both of you. But I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. I can stay in the waiting room if you prefer. The offer, and the respect it demonstrated, touched her deeply. You can stay, she said softly. As night fell, nurses came and went, checking monitors and administering medications. Damien remained in the uncomfortable chair, eyes rarely leaving the fetal heart monitor that provided tangible proof their child was still fighting. I'm scared, Serena admitted in the quiet darkness of the hospital room. I know. His voice was gentle, but you're stronger than you realize. Both of you are. Around midnight, when she thought he might have dozed off, Damien spoke again. I need to tell you something, not to change anything between us, but because tonight has reminded me how fragile life is. Serena turned toward him in the dimly lit room. What is it? The surveillance wasn't just about control, though that was certainly part of it. He paused, seeming to struggle with what came next. When I was 12, a business rival of my father's attempted to kidnap me to use me as leverage. The attempt failed, but my father's response wasn't concern for mate, was anger that I had become a vulnerability in his empire. The revelation stunned her. Damien. He increased security to extreme levels, not out of care, but to protect his asset. That became my model for protection. Invasive, absolute, detached. His voice grew keener. In therapy, I'm learning that I repeated his pattern with you and our child. I mistook control for care. Why didn't you tell me this before? I've never told anyone. The admission hung in the air between them. My father insisted the incident be buried. Knights don't show weakness, he said. I've carried that philosophy my entire life. Serena reached for his hand in the darkness. That doesn't excuse the surveillance, but it helps me understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said quickly, just understanding, and a chance to do better for our child. As dawn broke, Dr. Lee returned with cautiously good news. The bleeding had stopped, and the baby's vitals were strong. We'll keep you here for at least another day, she told Serena. Complete bed rest for 2 weeks after discharge, then limited activity until delivery. The cafe, Serena began worriedly. Can run without you for a few weeks, Damien said. Your health and the baby's come first. For once, his authoritative tone didn't bother her. This wasn't about control, but about genuine concern, something she was finally learning to distinguish. Later that morning, Lila rushed in, still wearing scrubs from her night shift. I just saw your name on the patient list. What happened? As Serena explained, she noticed her friend's evaluating gaze shifting between her and Damien, who had stepped aside to give them privacy while remaining within sight. So, he's back in the picture? Lila asked quietly. I don't know what he is, Serena admitted. Right now, he's just here when I needed someone. He hasn't left that hallway all night, Lila observed, not demanding anything, just waiting like he's standing guard. The image struck Serena forcefully. Damien, who controlled billion-dollar deals and commanded a corporate empire, reduced to sentinel duty in a hospital corridor, not commanding, not controlling, but simply present, available without imposing. It was perhaps the most profound evidence of his transformation. When Lila left, promising to check on her after some sleep, Damien returned to the room with a cup of ice chips, the only thing Serena was allowed until further evaluation. Thank you, she said, meaning more than just the ice, for coming when I called, for staying. He nodded, understanding the deeper gratitude. I told my therapist once that I wanted to learn the difference between protection and control. This feels like a practical exam. The small joke surprised a laugh from her. How do you think you're scoring? That's not for me to judge. His eyes met hers. But I'm trying. As afternoon faded into evening, with the immediate crisis downgraded to cautious monitoring, Serena found herself watching Damien. The haunted expression he'd worn through the night had eased. But there remained a vigilance in him, quiet, constant awareness of her needs, and the baby's status. This wasn't the calculating businessman who had offered her a clinical contract, nor the controlling figure who had violated her privacy. This was someone newer, perhaps someone who had been buried beneath layers of defensive armor all along. You should get some real rest, she told him. Go home, shower, sleep in an actual bed. I'm fine here, he insisted. Damien, she said gently. I'm stable. The baby's stable. We'll still be here when you get back. He hesitated, clearly torn between the need for rest and reluctance to leave. You'll call if anything changes anything at all. I promise. After he left, extracting multiple assurances from both Serena and the nursing staff, she lay back against her pillows, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Your father is a complicated man, she told the baby softly, but he's trying to be better for both of us. The baby kicked in response, strong and reassuring. Like its parents, their child was a fighter, resilient, determined, unwilling to surrender to circumstances beyond its control. Perhaps that was the legacy worth passing on. Beyond wealth or business empires or even genetic traits, the capacity to transform, to grow, to become better than the patterns that shaped you. It was a legacy Serena realized she wanted to share with Damien, whatever form their relationship might ultimately take. Chapter D's. Reconciliation. The 2 weeks of mandatory bed rest following Serena's hospital stay had been both frustrating and enlightening. Frustrating because she was accustomed to independence, to managing her cafe and preparing for the baby on her own terms. Enlightening because Damien's behavior during this period revealed just how much he had changed. He hadn't tried to move her to his penthouse or hire around-the-clock nurses, as the old Damien might have done. Instead, he'd asked what she needed and provided it, without overstepping grocery deliveries scheduled at her request. A temporary manager for the cafe who reported directly to her, a medical alert system she could activate if needed. Most surprising was his physical presence, visiting daily but never staying longer than she seemed comfortable with, bringing work to do in her living room while she rested, but leaving whenever she needed privacy. The doctors say the danger has passed, Serena told him one evening as they shared a quiet dinner he'd brought from her favorite Cuban restaurant. I can return to limited activity starting tomorrow. Damien nodded, relief evident in his expression. That's excellent news. What kind of limitations? No heavy lifting, no extended periods on my feet. She rubbed her belly, now quite prominent at nearly 8 months. I can supervise at the cafe but not work shifts. Reasonable restrictions. He hesitated. Would you like me to continue arranging coverage for the hands-on work? The question was carefully phrased, an offer, not an assumption, another sign of his ongoing transformation. Yes. Actually, that would be helpful. Serena studied him across the table. You've been different since that night at the hospital. I've been trying to be. He set down his fork. My therapist says change isn't a destination but a process. Some days I'm better at it than others. The vulnerability in this admission touched her. You've never struck me as someone who accepts personal limitations easily. I don't. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But nearly losing, he stopped abruptly. Nearly losing what? Damien met her eyes directly. You. Both of you. That night in the hospital clarified what matters. The simple truth in his words hung between them. Whatever their complicated past, whatever terms they'd negotiated and renegotiated, the reality remained. They were connected irrevocably by the life they'd created together. I should go, he said, sensing the weight of the moment. You need rest. At the door, he paused. There's something I'd like to show you tomorrow, if you feel up to it. Nothing strenuous, I promise. Curious, Serena agreed. The next day, Damien arrived with a wheelchair. Dismissing her protests with uncharacteristic humor, doctor's orders for limited activity. This doesn't count as walking. He drove them to an unfamiliar part of the city, finally stopping before a modern building with large windows and a discreet sign, Knight Family Foundation. What is this? Serena asked as he helped her from the car. Something new. He wheeled her inside to a bright, welcoming space where several staff members greeted them warmly. The foundation focuses on supporting single parents and children in crisis, Damien explained as they toured the facility, particularly those impacted by natural disasters. Serena took in the thoughtfully designed space childcare rooms, counseling offices, career development centers, even a teaching kitchen. When did you start this? The idea came during my leave of absence. He paused before a wall of photographs showing families rebuilding after hurricanes. I realized I had the resources to prevent others from facing the kind of desperate choice you were forced to make. The implication stunned her. This entire organization existed because of her story, because Damien had recognized the systemic vulnerabilities that had led her to their arrangement. The teaching kitchen, she said softly, understanding dawning. That's why you asked about my cafe recipes last month. He nodded. We're offering culinary entrepreneurship programs for parents looking to start small food businesses. Your expertise would be valuable whenever you're ready to share it. It wasn't manipulation or an attempt to buy forgiveness. It was something more profound, Damien channeling his resources and influence to address the root causes that had brought them together. This is remarkable, she said, genuinely moved. It's a start. He shrugged, slightly uncomfortable with praise. The foundation has a separate board and funding structure from Knight Enterprises. It will continue regardless of what happens between us. The distinction was important. This wasn't leverage or obligation, but genuine transformation of pain into purpose. Back at her apartment, Serena found herself seeing Damien with new eyes. The controlling businessman remained in some way she's attention to detail, his strategic thinking, his drive to create solutions, but those traits were now directed towards something beyond himself, beyond mere wealth accumulation or empire building. Thank you for showing me the foundation, she said as he helped her back to her couch. It means a lot that something positive could come from our complicated beginning. Damien sat in the chair across from her, his expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about beginnings lately, and second chances. Oh? Serena prompted. He leaned forward slightly. I know I have no right to ask for more than the co-parenting arrangement we've established, but these past weeks have made me realize that I want more than just cordial interactions for the sake of our child. Her heart quickened. What are you saying, Damien? I'm saying that I care for you not as the mother of my child, not as a business arrangement, but as a woman I've come to deeply respect and admire. His voice remained steady, but she could see the effort it took. I'm not asking for an immediate response, just the chance to see if there might be a path forward for us beyond the contract. The old fear rose in her, fear of his control, his power, the fundamental imbalance between them, but alongside it came a newer understanding of the man he was working to become. I don't know, she said honestly. There's still so much history between us. Trust broken. I understand. He nodded, accepting her hesitation without pushing. May I make a suggestion? Go ahead. What if we start fresh? No contract, no arrangement, no expectations beyond getting to know each other as we are now, not as we were when this began. Dating, you mean? The concept seemed almost absurd. Given their history, a smile touched his lips. Something like that. Except, we've done everything backward: conception before conversation, contracts before courtship. Despite herself, Serena laughed. That's certainly one way to describe it. I'm not asking for promises. Damien rose to leave, respecting the limitations she'd set for their interactions. Just consideration. After he'd gone, Serena sat for a long time, one hand resting on her belly, where their child grew increasingly active as the birth approached. The baby seemed to have opinions, kicking vigorously whenever Damien was near, as if recognizing its father's voice or presence. Could she trust again not just the new, evolving Damien, but herself and her own judgment? The next day, she decided to visit the cafe. Tired of confinement, regardless of medical advice, Antonio greeted her warmly, proudly showing off the smooth operations he'd maintained in her absence. Mr. Knight calls every morning, he mentioned casually, not to give instructions, just to ask what we need to keep things running for you. He does? This was news to Serena. Antonio nodded. He made it very clear that all decisions come from you. He's just providing resources. Throughout the cafe, she noticed small improvements. She hadn't authorized a more ergonomic setup behind the counter, a cushioned mat where she usually stood, a new office chair with better back supportal, chosen with her comfort in mind, yet implemented without fanfare or attempts to take credit. That evening, she called him. Thank you for the cafe improvements, she said when he answered. Antonio told me you've been checking in. I hope that's all right, Damien replied, sounding genuinely concerned he might have overstepped. I tried to respect your authority while supporting the staff. It's more than all right. It's exactly the kind of help I needed. She took a deep breath. About your suggestion yesterday, yes? The hope in his voice was unmistakable. I think we could try starting fresh. I mean, getting to know each other without all the baggage. I'd like that very much. The relief in his tone was palpable. Dinner tomorrow? I know a place with excellent food and comfortable seating for someone in your condition. Serena smiled, despite herself. That sounds nice. The restaurant he chose was neither ostentatious nor overly intimatia. Small, family-owned Italian place with private booths and exceptional pasta. Damien arrived with a single yellow rose instead of an extravagant bouquet, another sign of his growing understanding of her preferences. Their conversation flowed more easily than she'd expected, touching on shared interests they'd never had time to discover, books they'd both loved, travel experiences, even political views that were surprisingly aligned, despite their different backgrounds. Tell me about your grandmother, Damien said as they shared a tiramisu. The woman who inspired your cafe. The question opened a flood of memories and stories. Elena's fierce independence, her joy in feeding others, her belief that good food created community. Damien listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly engaging with her history, not just making conversation. She would have liked you, Serena said finally, surprising herself with the realization. Not the you I first met, but this version. She appreciated people who could admit their mistakes and work to improve. I wish I could have met her. His expression turned reflective. My own family legacy is considerably less nurturing. I'm trying to ensure our child has a different experience. The word "our" no longer made her bristle. Somehow, through crisis and careful rebuilding of trust, they had genuinely become partners in this journey. As weeks passed and her due date approached, their cautious reconnection deepened. Damien continued to respect her independence, while offering support that was increasingly welcome. They attended birthing classes together, laughing at the instructor's surprised expression when they explained their unusual situation. We're figuring it out as we go, Serena told the confused woman. The nursery in Serena's apartment took shape with careful collaboration, Damien providing resources, but Serena making design decisions, both of them assembling furniture late into evenings filled with conversation and growing companionship. One night, as they finished setting up the crib, Damien sat back on his heels, an expression of wonder crossing his face. What is it? Serena asked, noticing his sudden stillness. I just realized I'm actually looking forward to 3 o'clock of feedings and diaper changes. He shook his head, bemused. If you had told the man who first proposed our arrangement that he'd feel this way, he wouldn't have believed it. Serena smiled. Neither would I, honestly. As she walked him to the door that night, their hands brushed, then linked. The simple contact sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with their original night together and everything to do with the journey they'd traveled since. Damien hesitated at the threshold. May I? He asked softly. Understanding his request, Serena nodded. His kiss was gentle, questioning rather than demanding, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leaned closer, allowing herself to acknowledge what had been building between them for weeks, not just reconciliation, but something new and tender. When they separated, his eyes held a vulnerability she'd never seen in the controlled businessman she'd first met. I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. Not because of the baby, not because of the contract, but because of who you are and who I'm becoming with you. The words hung between them, honest, unadorned, no manipulation, no leverage, just truth offered without expectation. I need time, she replied, not rejecting his feelings but not fully embracing them either. This is still so complicated. Time is something I can give. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. We've done everything else backward. There's no rush for this. As he left, Serena placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby's movements beneath her palms. What do you think, little one? Should we trust him? Trust this? The baby kicked firmly, as if in answer. That night, alone in her apartment but no longer feeling truly alone, Serena realized the greatest transformation wasn't Damien's shift from controlling billionaire to mindful partner, or even her own journey from desperate cafe owner to confident mother-to-be. The true transformation was in what existed between them, a connection that had begun as a cold business arrangement and had somehow, against all odds, blossomed into something genuine and hopeful. Not quite love, not yet, but perhaps the foundation for something even stronger, a partnership built on hard-won understanding, mutual respect, and the shared commitment to be better than the patterns that had shaped them. As she drifted toward sleep, Serena found herself looking forward to tomorrow and all the tomorrows that would follow. Whatever label they eventually placed on their relationship, they had already achieved something remarkable: genuine reconciliation, not just with each other, but with the better versions of themselves. Chapter 11. New beginning. It's time, Serena said calmly into the phone, one hand pressed against her lower back as another contraction built. My water just broke. I'm on my way. Damien's voice held controlled urgency. 5 minutes. Do you need me to stay on the line? No, I'm fine. Lila's here. She'd been staying with her friend for the final week, knowing her due date was imminent. True to his word, Damien arrived in precisely 5 minutes, a small overnight bag in hand. In the 3 weeks since his confession of feelings, they'd fallen into a comfortable rhythmknot, quite a couple. But more than co-parents preparing for a child, the contractions are 10 minutes apart. Lila informed him as he helped Serena to the car. Her hospital bag is in the trunk. At the hospital, Dr. Lee confirmed Serena was in early labor. First, babies often take their time, she said reassuringly. Try to rest between contractions. Hours passed in a blur of increasing pain and brief respites. Through it all, Damien remained a steady presence, offering water, applying counter-pressure to her back during contractions, never showing impatience during the long labor. You don't have to stay, Serena told him during her 18th hour of labor, exhaustion evident in her voice. I'm exactly where I want to be, he replied simply. When the time finally came to push, Serena gripped Damien's hand with crushing force. He never flinched. His eyes filled with a mixture of awe and concern as he watched her battle to bring their child into the world. One more push, Doctor. Lee encouraged. The head is almost out. With a final, tremendous effort, Serena felt the baby slide from her body, followed immediately by a strong, indignant cry. It's a boy, Doctor, Lee announced, but before Serena could fully process this information, the doctor's expression changed. And there's another one. Twins. I need you to push again, Serena. Twins? Damien's composed facade finally cracked, his eyes wide with shock. 3 minutes later, a second cry joined the first, as their unexpected second son entered the world. How did we not know? Serena asked weakly as the nurses placed 2 tiny blanket-wrapped bundles on her chest. Doctor. Lee shook her head, looking chagrined. The second baby was positioned directly behind the first in all our scans. It happens occasionally, one twin hiding behind the other. Damien stood motionless, staring at the 2 identical faces. 2, he whispered. We have 2 sons. The wonder in his voice brought tears to Serena's eyes. This was not the cold businessman who had proposed a clinical arrangement for an heir. This was a father seeing his children for the first time, overwhelmed by unexpected joy. Later, after mother and babies had been cleaned and settled in a private room, Damien sat beside Serena's bed, cradling one son while she held the other. They need names, she said softly. Damien nodded, studying the tiny face of the baby in his arms. I was thinking perhaps, Antonio, after your cafe manager who helped rebuild your dream. Antonio, Serena repeated, touched by his thoughtfulness. And for this little one, Raphael, after my grandfather. Antonio and Raphael Knight. Damien tested the names, then hesitated. Unless you'd prefer Brooks. The question reflected how far they'd come, Damien deferring to her preference rather than assuming his family name would prevail. Knight is fine, she assured him. They're as much yours as mine. He looked up, his expression suddenly serious. Speaking of which, setting Antonio carefully in the hospital bassinet, Damien reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Serena's heart stuttered. Damien, this isn't because of the babies, he said quickly, opening the box to reveal a simple yet elegant diamond ring. And I'm not asking because of our contract or arrangement. I'm asking because these past months have shown me who I want to be and who I want beside me. He moved from the chair to one knee beside her bed, still mindful of Raphael in her arms. I love you, Serenanat. The transaction we began with. But the partnership we've built. I love your strength, your kindness, your refusal to let me hide behind wealth or power. He held the ring up, eyes never leaving hers. Will you marry Minot for the babies? Not for convenience, but because we found something neither of us was looking for. Serena looked from Damien to the tiny boy in her arms, to his twin sleeping peacefully in the bassinet. Their journey had been anything but traditional business arrangement to reluctant partnership to unexpected love. Yes, she said softly, tears filling her eyes. But on one condition, anything. She smiled. The contractor original agreement, I want us to tear it up together. A fresh start, with no legal obligations between us except those we choose freely. Damien's answering smile was radiant. I'll have Valeria bring it tomorrow. It's time we replaced it with something better. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gently adjusted Raphael's blanket, Serena marveled at the path that had brought them here from a hurricane's destruction to the creation of a family. None of them had anticipated what had begun as a cold, clinical transaction had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined. A new beginning built not on obligation or necessity, but on hard-won trust and genuine love. Chapter 12. Full circle. 1 year later, Brooks Flow Cafe buzzed with activity as staff transformed the space for a private event. White flowers adorned every surface, fairy lights twinkled from the ceiling, and the aroma of Elena's special recipes filled the air. In the small office, Serena stood before a mirror in an elegant ivory dress. Her grandmother's sapphire pendant something, blue hanging at her throat. A soft knock preceded the entrance of a young woman carrying 2 identical baby boys in matching suits. "The little gentlemen are ready," she announced, handing Raphael to Lila and Antonio to Serena. At 1 year old, the twins had Damien's gray eyes, and Serena's dimpled smile, a perfect blend of their parents. "There's my beautiful family," Sophia, now a friend, appeared in the doorway. "Everyone's ready." Serena took a deep breath. "I never imagined getting married in a cafe, not just any cafe," Lila reminded her. "The place where everything began and ended and began again." Brooks Flow had expanded into a small chain across Miami, with profits partially funding the Knight Family Foundation's culinary training programs. What had once been Serena's solo dream had evolved into a shared vision of community support. A melody began playing, signaling it was time. Lila took Antonio from Serena, prepared to walk ahead with both boys. The cafe had been transformed, with white chairs facing an arbor woven with flowers, beneath which Damien waited. His eyes found hers immediately, and the emotion on his usually controlled face brought tears to her eyes. As Serena walked toward him, Damien's eyes never left hers. This was not the businessman who calculated every move, but the man who had learned to lead with his heart. When she reached him, he took her hands, his voice low, "From collateral to forever. I never believed in fate until a hurricane brought you to my office." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Damien spoke of transformation and second chances, Serena of resilience and unexpected gifts. As they exchanged rings, the twins babbled happily from Lila's arms. At the reception, as they swayed together for their first dance, Serena rested her head against Damien's chest. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Beyond what I thought possible," she admitted. "When I signed that contract, I thought I was trading away my future for financial security. I never imagined I was actually stepping into a better one." "The contract," Damien mused. "I had it framed, you know." Serena looked up in surprise. "You what?" "The torn pieces, in a shadow box. A reminder that sometimes our most carefully constructed plans lead to something far more valuable when they fall apart." Over his shoulder, she could see the twins being fussed over by Sophia and Lila, their tiny hands reaching for the centerpiece flowers. "My father believed children should be seen, not herd-controlled rather than celebrated," Damien said, watching them. "Our boys will grow up knowing they're loved for who they are, not what they achieve." Before they cut the cake, Damien addressed their guests. "The Knight Family Foundation is establishing a disaster recovery fund, specifically for small business owners affected by hurricanes and other natural disasters. Starting with a $10 million initial investment, the fund will provide interest-free loans and grants to help people rebuild without making the kind of desperate choices circumstance forced upon Serena." Later, as the celebration wound down, Serena stood with Damien at the cafe's entrance, watching their twins sleeping peacefully in Lila's arms. "What now, Mrs. Knight?" Damien asked, his arm warm around her waist. "Now we live," she said simply, "not according to a contract or a business arrangement or even societal expectations, just authentically, day by day." Outside, Miami's lights glittered against the night sky. Serena thought of the desperate young woman who had once stood in the ruins of her cafe, believing her dreams destroyed beyond repair. If she could have glimpsed this future, not just the restored business, but the family, the love, the purpose that had emerged from tragedy, would she have believed it possible? "Ready to go home?" Damien asked softly. Home, not his penthouse or her apartment, but the house they had chosen together, with room for the twins to grow and space for whatever the future might bring. "Yes," Serena said, turning to gather their sons. "Let's go home." As they left the cafe that had witnessed both their lowest moments and highest triumphs, Serena felt a sense of completion. The hurricane that had destroyed her first dream had ultimately led her to a greater one, just rebuilding a cafe. but building a life rich with purpose, partnership, and love. What had begun as collateral, a desperate exchange of her body for financial salvation, had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined: a heart freely given, a family joyfully created, a future unlimited by the contracts and calculations of their past. Full circle, indeed, but also, beautifully, a new beginning.